Have you noticed that there are always people around you who hold you back? This is not a coincidence. It's a system that eats away at motivation and replaces it with doubt. In a moment, you will learn the specific signs of those who truly expand your potential. Imagine an evening after meeting with friends. You return home, and inside there's emptiness. Not because you are physically tired, but because the conversations drained your desire to act. One person sneered at your idea. Another shifted the topic to petty complaints. A third cast doubt on every ambition. This is not the drama of one evening. It's a pattern that slowly redistributes your attention, energy, and self-perception. When such people are constantly around, your ideas seem strange, and you start choosing smaller goals to avoid hearing the next skepticism. The contrast. Remember a moment when, after talking to someone, you left feeling light and with a plan. You were not only inspired, you had the first specific steps in mind. You didn't need to prove yourself. You needed to act. The difference between these two states is not a coincidence of character in people, but a set of habitual reactions that they trigger in you. Some reinforce doubt, while others fuel belief. These reactions are visible in simple things, in tone, in questions, in how they treat you at the moment of a mistake. I do not promise magic, but I promise specifics. In the coming sections, you will receive practical markers of who expands you, and the first practical action that can be applied today to minimize the influence of those who steal energy. This is not a lecture on positive thinking. It is a guide on how to choose an environment that makes you a little stronger every week. The topic of environment is important now for several simple reasons. The world is overflowing with superficial contacts. Time has become a scarcity, and the quality of human connections directly affects the speed of your results. We live in an era of instant connections, but have lost the ability to maintain those relationships that truly nurture talent and character. In the past, a mentor could accidentally appear in your life and change your trajectory. Now this happens less often, because most connections are superficial and geared towards immediate benefits or emotional noise. You are not alone in feeling that working hard is no longer enough. Many of those who are willing to spend hours on development return to circles where their ideas are devalued, where they are asked why, instead of how can I help? A specific observation: you can have a productive day, but by evening you notice that a conversation with a colleague or acquaintance has undermined your motivation, leaving only fatigue and doubt. Another observation: people whose close ones support risk and growth show measurable progress. They are more likely to try new formats, more likely to maintain habits, and less likely to postpone big projects to someday. Why is this important now? Because our time for development is limited, and every ounce of energy expended has a cost. The right environment acts as an accelerator. It reduces internal resistance, makes mistakes less painful, and increases the number of repetitions. And it is precisely these repetitions that create skill. Here is the roadmap for how we will proceed. First, we will analyze the feelings and signals you experience around a destructive environment. Second, we will determine why we are drawn to the wrong people. This is not a mystery of character, but a set of beliefs. Third, we will demonstrate a typical mistake in choosing an environment and how to avoid it. Fourth, we will provide examples of people who truly inspire and nurture. Fifth, we will consider how life changes with the right company and practice 3 specific steps that can be applied right now. A new thesis that is important to keep in mind from the very beginning. The right environment is not just emotional support. It is a structural tool for development. It changes not only your mood, but also the habits you form, the opportunities you notice, and the decisions you consider possible. This means that the choice of people around you is not a secondary detail, but a part of your work strategy for growth. Next, we will start with the simplest task: recognizing the signals you are already experiencing and showing how to turn this intuition into a specific action plan. There are specific, recognizable sensations, not the general words "bah" or "uncomfortable," but a series of small signals that add up to one big problem. The first is the internal shrinkage. You come home, and your brain seems to have reduced the picture of the future. Big plans become dusty. The voice that usually wants to try goes silent. This is not instant sadness. It's a gradual liquidation of ambitions. Ideas cease to sound like plans and turn into risky fantasies that are better left unspoken. The second is the constant adjustment of speech. You catch yourself thinking that before you talk about a project, you automatically write a preface in your head. This is not important yet, but I am just trying. I don't know if it will work out. This defensive insert is a marker. A person is nearby with whom you feel the need to soften yourself, to hide threats. The voice changes not because you are less confident in the idea, but because people around you expect mistakes and ridicule. The third is physical fatigue that is not related to activity. After 2 hours of talking with a certain group, your shoulders drop, as if someone has removed the supports from you. This feeling is when your brain becomes heavy, and you need about 10 minutes of silence to get back to your normal rhythm. Here, it's important to distinguish fatigue from ordinary physical exhaustion. You haven't done more work, but it feels like the charge for action inside has diminished. The fourth is choosing smaller goals. You notice that your plans have become more conservative. The internal dialogue goes, better to do something small and not attract attention. This is a defensive model. In order to avoid external doubt, you sacrifice growth. The fifth is the blurred boundary between honest criticism and systemic demotivation. Fair, specific feedback is one thing, while constantly reducing ambitions to unrealistic is another. If after a conversation you didn't receive any actionable advice, but got a sea of doubts and emotional comments, that's a sign. A mini situation. Imagine a short lunch with colleagues. You start talking about a mini experiment that could save a week's work. One person hums, another interrupts, the third sends a meme. After 15 minutes, you catch yourself thinking, why are we even discussing this? You haven't become any smarter in those 15 minutes. Your idea was simply marked as not serious. This is not a coincidence. This is a system that revises your zone of what is acceptable. A unique metaphor for this feeling. Imagine that your ideas are a draft on the table, and next to it, someone lays down tracing paper with black lines of doubt. Layer by layer, your lines lose contrast, and in the end, you are not sure if it was your work. The tracing paper is not an aggressor. It simply makes your image faded. The essence of the internal problem is not in the absence of talent or wrong attitude. The problem is that around you, you develop an adaptive reflex to adjust, and this reflex eats away your ability to notice and realize big opportunities. Diagnosis starts with careful observation of 3 things: how you talk about yourself, how quickly your energy drains, and what decisions you made after communication. These 3 indicators will show when the environment ceases to be a resource and becomes a filter for your possibilities. It seems paradoxical. Why do we return to those who have let us down when there are others who uplift us? The answer is simple and multi-layered at the same time. The comfortable habit of unpleasant relationships often masquerades as social security. The first reason is the habit of familiar dynamics. Even if it's toxic, it is predictable. The brain prefers predictable pain to unknown safety. You know better how to counter old doubts than how to live in new support, where you need to rebuild your usual beliefs about yourself. The second reason is the fear of status within the group. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether you are right. What matters is whose you are. Being opposite in a tight circle often means losing social credits, jokes, access to information, support on everyday matters. This is particularly noticeable in work collectives and long-time friend groups. It's as if you are paying a tax for the likelihood of being understood. The third reason is the reinforcement system. Negative reactions from loved ones offer immediate, easily interpretable feedback. When people criticize, you get a strong signal that you need to change your behavior, and it feels like management. Positive expansion is less dramatic, more vague. It requires time and patience, so the brain undervalues its worth. The fourth is identification. We gravitate towards people who confirm the version of ourselves that we know. If there's an I who doesn't follow through, then an environment that constantly reminds you of this provides confirmation of an old identity. And worse still, some people choose such environments to avoid facing the demand for change. Their choice is very pragmatic. The unique model is social reverse capital. Imagine you have a trust account. There's quick income, laughter, shared complaints, light jabs that provide a sense of belonging. And there are long-term investments, deep conversations, honest criticism, support for risk. The wrong people provide you quick income and spend the entire limit on the account of growth. This difference in the liquidity of relationships explains why we often choose those who do not facilitate growth. An example of a mini situation. You were seeking advice on a product solution and turned to an old acquaintance who always knows better. He criticizes the idea, suggests cleaning it up, but doesn't offer resources. You leave feeling that the idea is worthless, but at the same time feel at home because the reaction is familiar. This explains why people return to negative relationships. It's cheaper psychologically. Finally, there is a motivational trap. The idea that if I prove to everyone, I will be accepted. This is a false scenario that turns development into a race for approval. The people who expand you do not provide quick approval. They set tasks and watch how you react. To understand this means to stop confusing noise with support and begin to redistribute your social capital towards people who are willing to invest in you longer than a single conversation. The most common, yet subtle mistake is seeking affirmation rather than challenge. We often mistakenly believe that the environment should soothe and confirm our identity. In practice, this turns people into a mirror that only reflects what you already know. This is not support. It is stagnation. The mistake manifests in three forms. The first is the compliment without growth syndrome. People give you kind words, but do not provide constructive feedback. Comfortable approval replaces development. Externally, everything looks good. You have many friends. People help with small tasks, but large projects do not progress. Inside, you feel a quiet stagnation that is difficult to measure. For you, it seems that everything is fine. The second form is ambition isolation. This is when you subconsciously downscale your ambitions to avoid conflict within the group. You do less, not because you do not want to, but because you anticipate resistance. Here, agreement appears as a survival tool. I won't ask for a raise to avoid angering my colleagues. I won't start a project to avoid seeming ambitious. The third is overpaid trust. You invest emotional resources in those who do not return them in the form of growth. This is not always malicious. People may sincerely want the best for you, but their resources and benchmarks do not match yours. You expect behavior from them that they cannot provide, and blame yourself when no changes occur. A unique mistake that is rarely discussed is compromise in language. You adjust your speech and style of action to fit in, and in this process, you lose unique elements of your approach. Small linguistic adjustments mean that ideas no longer sound radical. Metaphors lose their strength, and product descriptions become more understandable, but less groundbreaking. After a month of such adjustments, you will find that your materials lack the energy with which you started. Mini situation. A team representative wants to implement an experiment and softens the phrasing before the presentation because they don't want to scare management. The result is that the idea becomes vague, receives conditional approval, and no one invests in its execution. The problem is not in the idea, but in the fact that you changed the language and rhythm to avoid conflicts. And this killed the potential. How this breaks life. You lose the skill of engaging in difficult conversations, the skill of asserting ambitions. Instead of training your immunity to criticism and finding structure, you remove the irritating element, your own ambition. To break free from this mistake, you need to recognize that comfortable relationships are not always the right choice for growth. The next step is to learn to distinguish quiet approval from resources for development, and purposefully seek out those who will challenge you, not just praise you. Reevaluating your surroundings can be done not through sharp rejections, but through a change of perspective. Those who nurture operate under different rules. They are not necessarily warmer. They are more honest. They do not agree just to avoid arguments. They talk about what might break and suggest how to adjust the system. This new perspective changes perception. Support is no longer in the words, "I like it," but in asking uncomfortable questions. An example of a real situation. A person appeared in a design studio who asked 3 questions for each project. Why is this needed? What will happen if it doesn't work? And what will I learn if I do this now? These questions seemed sharp, but after 6 months, the team changed the criteria for selecting ideas. Now projects went through a filter of usefulness, not just attractiveness. Immediate comfort might be less, but the speed of learning has increased. This is a typical case of people who expand. They structure risk, turning it into a scale of learning. A unique model. Pilot contact check. Imagine a short experiment. You choose a new acquaintance or colleague and set up a 3-contact test with them. The first contact is a brief conversation about what is important to you. The second contact is a request for advice, where you ask specifically for criticism, not support. The third contact is observing the reaction when you take a small step and seeing who stays close. This model is a way to quickly understand if a person expands you, not by words, but by action. A mini situation. After a networking event, you return to a person who offered a challenging thought and gave a practical task. A month later, you receive the first invitation for collaboration. This is not magic. It's a sequence, an honest question, constructive criticism, checking involvement. Another illustration of the behavior of those who nurture. They can separate emotions from tasks. They may be sharp, but their sharpness is directed at the result, not the person. They don't hide resources. They offer them in exchange for seriousness. This is important. Expansive people value energy and time, and therefore choose investments that increase the overall speed of development. The change of perspective here is simple but powerful. Look not at how a person talks about you, but at what they do when you take a risk. Support that nurtures is that which makes risk less painful in the long run, not that which immediately provides warmth. Learning to see these signs means no longer confusing sympathy with resources and starting to consciously choose those who truly help take the next step. When you start systematically moving towards people who expand, the changes are not always dramatically visible at first. More often, they cascade into a reorganization of habits and decisions. The first and most noticeable change is the disappearance of constant gray fatigue. You notice that in the evenings, instead of icy emptiness, there is a desire to act. Energy changes its nature. Before, you had to recover after socializing. Now, recovery becomes a natural part of the day. The second change is in the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Instead of, "Can I do this?" you start asking, "What are the 3 most useful steps I can take now?" And, "What risk do I need to take to test the hypothesis?" This is not just a change of words. It is a change in thinking strategy. Instead of defense, experimentation begins. And this experiment has its own internal rhythm: fast iterations, feedback, and adaptation. The third change is the expansion of the radius of possibilities. Small conversations turn into proposals, invitations, and joint projects. One reason for this is that when you are around those who value risk, you make risk visible and elevate it to the level of discussion. People begin to offer resources and contacts because they see your willingness to act. The unique model of results is the energy bank. Imagine that you keep track of your emotional capital. You have sources of replenishment, honest feedback, timely questions, offers to help, and sources of expenditure, skepticism, contempt, passive aggression. When you change your environment, the balance becomes positive. You invest more than you take in the form of destructive criticism, and this gives an investment effect. Skills grow faster, and decisions are made bolder. The fourth change is that small excuses cease to dominate. You begin to see that most "I can't because" are the result of your environment, not objective limitations. This opens the way to ambitions that once seemed "not for me." You do not become perfect, but you start trying more often what you previously postponed. The fifth change is in language. Instead of defensive statements, direct descriptions emerge. "I tried, here's what happened. I need honest criticism. I am ready to work with this risk." This language attracts other people who speak the same language and essentially creates gravity for new, stronger connections. The mini-situation summary. 6 months later, a person who stopped conforming to dead noise receives an invitation to participate in a project that would have seemed impossible before. This is the result of not just one conversation, but an accumulation. Less energy is spent on self-justification, more on testing hypotheses and taking real steps. Changes come not as a miracle, but as a sum of new habits and new people, and they change the pace of your life. Step 1. Micro-pilot contact. The 3-touch test. Spend a week and a half on one new connection. The first contact. 10 minutes of an open conversation about your goal. The second contact. A brief request for honest, specific criticism, not compliments. The third contact. A small action that you will actually take and communicate to this person. Observe the reaction. Does the person offer help? Ask clarifying questions. Stay in touch. This is a quick filter. It shows not words, but willingness to invest. Step 2. Daily micro-habit and a question for yourself. Each evening, write down one line. Who expanded me today, and how? A shortened version, a note of plus or minus next to the names of the people you interacted with. This habit takes 1 minute and makes visible what is usually hidden. The question teaches you to notice behavior, not images. It sets criteria by actions, not sympathies. Step 3. Action for the day. 5 minutes for requesting a resource. Each day, send one message with a specific request, even if it's a simple question. Ask for an opinion. Ask for a contact. Ask for a test task. Specificity is more important than scale. A small request shows who responds with resources and who only offers words. After a month, you will have a realistic picture of expanding connections. Next, a way to notice progress. Energy counter. Keep a table with 3 columns. Name, influence after contact. Rated from -2 to +2. Specific next action you took. Day by day, you will see the trend. Whether your energy balance is increasing or decreasing. This objectifies a feeling that used to seem vague. Finally, how to avoid falling back into old patterns. Use the one-step rule. If your old environment pulls you back, agree to one brief interaction instead of a full return. A 30-minute meeting, a conversation without discussing projects, or simply a message limit. At the same time, apply the transparency rule. Articulate your goal in a couple of sentences in advance to immediately see the reaction. And lastly, agree with yourself to check contacts in a month. Not everything is resolved in one evening, but it can be resolved through repetition and measurement. These steps are simple because the major work here is not in drama, but in the habit of noticing and filtering. Start with the micro-pilot. Keep one line at the end of the day. Send one specific request and track influence. After 6 weeks, you will not only have intuition, but also real data that will indicate who among the people around you truly expands and who drains energy. The main idea is that the environment is not a joke or a moral. It is a tool that shapes your habits, language, and decision-making speed. When you are around people who provide specific feedback, you learn faster and take more risks. When you are around someone who constantly belittles your impulse, you limit your range of possibilities, often without noticing how it happens. The difference lies not in words of support, but in who invests in your next step. The second thought is that changes occur at the level of systemic details. Do not expect dramatic breaks or theatrical statements. In practice, there are 3 things. Who stays close when you take a small risk? Who offers a resource in response to a request? Who changes the tone of your thoughts after a conversation? It is the accumulation of such small signals that changes the trajectory. Little by little, you stop spending energy on excuses and start spending it on testing hypotheses. The third thought is that control returns to you through simple habits. You are not obligated to change everything instantly. It is enough to start systematically recording, testing, and adjusting your social circle. A systemic approach provides you with feedback, and feedback gives you an advantage in choosing. You invest in those connections that bring growth and reduce those that only produce noise. Conclusion: do not wait for others to change for you. Change the way you choose the people around you. Small, regular check-ins and 1 or 2 specific habits yield more results than endless discussions about toxicity. This is practical work, and it is available today. If this video was helpful to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next day.